Welcome back to another episode of the Miami Heat Roundtable. I'm your host, Amir. And so for today's episode, we actually have two guests joining us. We have Grant joining us from the GM Sports Report, and we also have Ethan from the Five Reasons Sports Network. And I believe this is the third time you're joining us, Ethan, on the show. So thank you for joining us. And Grant, thank you for
Sure.
joining as well.
Sure. Good to be here with you guys.
Thank you for having me.
Yep, no problem. So we're getting close to the start of training camp, thank God, because we all know the Miami Heat have had a relatively quiet off season, and we know the Miami Heat are effectively running it back with the primary core of Jimmy, Bam, and Tyler for the sixth time in a row. And because of that, the Miami Heat will have to rely on health and player development. And so, Ethan, in terms of player progression, which two Miami Heat players do you think will take the biggest leap? And let's choose one from the presumed starting lineup. Game one, I'm going to assume it's going to be Terry, Tyler, Jimmy, Bam, and Jovic. So who of that five will have the biggest leap? And then pick someone off the bench who you think will have the biggest leap next season.
Well, it's quite a presumption because I don't know that they know that yet. I mean, I've been told that they have two definite starters. So I mean, that's Bam and that's Jimmy. And so, that doesn't mean it can't be Tyler, Terry, and Jovic. That seemed to be the lineup they were leaning into last year. But it also could be Terry and Duncan. It also could be Hawkins could be somewhere in the starting lineup. Highsmith could be somewhere in the starting lineup. I don't think everything is settled in that regard. I think they want to present this as a competition and give guys a chance to kind of make their statements in training camp. Now, it was supposed to be a competition between Herro and Oladipo a couple of years ago, and that never really materialized. So we'll see if that materializes this year. As far as making the biggest jump, I mean, I think the clear guy is Hawkins. I think what you saw in Summer League, that's pretty typical that a guy in his second year looks much better than the guys who are there in their first year. So I try not to make too much of it, but everything I've heard about him has been really positive this offseason. And excuse me, I think that we may have limited our expectation of him simply because he came in as an older rookie. So the idea being that, essentially that he'd hit his upside. They don't believe he's hit his upside. It doesn't appear to this point that he has. I mean, I think he hit a bit of a wall during the season last year. Some of it was the groin injury. Some of it was the length of the season. Some of it was teams kind of figuring out. He had this one move where he would kind of go spin to the middle. They took that away, and then he had to adjust back to it. So, but I think he's the clear number one. I think the one that people want to see progress the most is Jovic. And, we'll see. Again, some of this depends if he remains in the starting lineup. He did some good things there towards the last third of the season. And defensively, he was competent. But I think the issue they're going to have with Jovic in the starting lineup is if they're starting Rozier and Herro, I don't know that that's going to work defensively. He's got to cover too much ground. And, you're basically just leaving it for Bam and Jimmy to clean everything up. And with the way that we're going into the season, not really know where Jimmy's head's going to be, I don't know what you're getting from him defensively from the jump. So that's a bit of a challenge, but I think those are the two guys I think clearly that they would like to see take the lead.
All right, so Ethan, so you mentioned, Terry Rozier. So how do you feel like Terry Rozier will fit in with this Miami Heat group, especially with him possibly starting next to Tyler Herro? So what do you expect from Terry Rozier coming into next season?
Well, I think we should expect kind of what we saw last year, except that he should be, as provided the neck is healthy, which I've heard it is, they were basically told that he could risk serious long-term injury. So that's, they never want to give this stuff away publicly, but that's what was going on. I think what you'll see is, sort of a roller coaster with him. And, the idea is more good than bad, but, he struggled to shoot the ball when he first came in. Then he kind of caught fire for a little bit. Then he got hurt. So I think, they don't view him as a traditional point guard. He's not a just bring the ball up and set everybody up. They need him to be a scorer. They don't have enough scoring on this team. I think that he could get the scoring average back up 17, 18, something along those lines with this group. I don't know that they're going to have a 20-point scorer. I feel like there's four guys who could be in that range, and he's one of them. The other one is potentially Hawkins if Jimmy misses a lot of time and Hawkins gets some of those starts. But I think that for Rozier, defensively he competes. He has some limitations. He's got a longer wingspan than Tyler does. But I have serious reservations about the Herro Rozier backcourt defensively. I think that's going to be problematic. And I know that people can say, well, and you're saying Duncan, but at least there's a little more size there. It's just a small backcourt for the modern NBA. And so we'll see how that goes. But offensively, I think, again, they're going to look to him to score. And, Tyler was excited about the prospect of some more attention going to Terry, kind of spreading that out to clear some things for him. But again, we never got to see it materialize because Tyler got hurt and then Tyler came back and Terry got hurt. So, but I think, look, they traded a first-round pick for him, and that limited a lot of things they could do this offseason. So they need to get value out of him on the court.
I really love what you said, Ethan, about the fact that you don't think that we're going to have a 20-point-per-game scorer, because I agree. I think since there's one ball and so many people can score on this team, I don't really think that's a big deal. But my question for you, and I'm really interested in what you have to say about this, because I feel the last few years offensively, this team has deferred more to Jimmy Butler, hoping that Tyler Herro would step up. You get Terry Rozier, his added offense. But I think with what we saw with Team USA and what we saw the second half of the season with Bam Adebayo, I think it's time to personally give the keys to Bam Adebayo as the number one option. And he was actually asked this earlier, and I feel like he gave this amazing political answer. It's something you want to hear from your captain. But for somebody that's close to the team, somebody that hears things that other people don't hear, I really want to hear what your opinion is on Bam Adebayo having the keys. And I mean offensively, being the number one focal point option offensively. I'll let you talk.
Well, Ernest, I think they need to make a concerted effort to keep him engaged as a primary scorer. I don't know about the giving the keys thing. And I'll say this, even though I do think there's more to unpack with Bam offensively. People talk about the three-point shot. Obviously, that's something we'll discuss. There's also being a little stronger down in the post. The mid-range numbers fell off a little bit last year. He kind of became dependent on that foul line jumper and kind of going into it, sort of the same way every time. I think that, we talk about him being, I don't see him as a 25-point scorer. I see him as a guy, though, that they can run more offense through. I see him as more of a primary facilitator, maybe, than he was this past year. I think they got away from that a little bit. But, the way I've put it, and I sort of stole this from somebody on Twitter, and I can't remember who I stole it from. But to me, Bam is their floor and Jimmy is their ceiling. So by that, I mean, like, without Bam, everything falls apart. But I don't know that unless you got nuclear Jimmy, this team really has a chance to, make serious noise in the East. And I'm talking about even before the playoffs. And so, they have a game with Jimmy that they play. It doesn't necessarily fit some of the others on the roster. He likes to slow it down. Spo wants to push pace a little bit more. I think he's going to want to push pace even more now that he has Rozier for a full season. One of the things I think that's important is Rozier has to keep Bam engaged. We saw Lowry do it a little bit, and one of the things Kyle would do is he would throw the ball into Bam and then he'd get out of the way and, force Bam to be aggressive. There is this need to force him. I think where you're coming from, Ernest, that makes sense here is I don't know if it's going to manifest itself into him being their leading scorer every night or most nights. But I do think that what we've seen in the offseason, and particularly with the Olympics, was the relationships that he built with guys like Curry and LeBron and Durant. He has to have more confidence now. He just has to. And, I know he didn't like being captain last year, even before he kind of gave that answer to me at the press conference where at the end of the season where, he kind of made light of it, but I heard he really didn't like it. He's not a guy who likes to lay down the law with people. Not comfortable for him. He's a different kind of leader than UD was. And it's also really tough to lead in that locker room independently when, Jimmy has been the best player for a long time, and Jimmy's way of leadership is totally different than anybody else who's ever existed. So it does make it, I think, a little bit complex for Bam in those situations. And I think that bleeds into the stuff on the floor, because he sometimes does not want to take the reins. I think, because he feels like, okay, well, we were supposed to get Tyler involved in these actions. We're supposed to get Jimmy involved in these actions. I mean, I think when you came in, Amir, you said, like, this is the year 6 of this group. They will claim they're not running it back, that, that the roster is really completely turned over the past 2 years, with the exception of, I guess, 4 or 5 guys. But I think when everybody talks about running it back, and they've asked me, I can tell you, like, what does that mean? Everybody says running it back. What does that mean? We've turned over the roster. I said, well, basically it means Tyler's still here. I mean, I think that's how fans perceive it, because you said it's the 6th year of this build with Jimmy, Bam, and Tyler. And we do know that in Heat history that the third guy is usually moved by now, whether it was Jamal Mashburn or then Eddie Jones. Others who've been third guys have been moved. And so I think that's where this thing has gotten hung up a little bit, that it's like, okay, whose team is it supposed to be? What direction are they going? Are they going to play through Tyler and Bam together? Are they going to stay with Jimmy because they kind of know what that game is? They're going to give Hawkins, more opportunities. Is Rozier going to take the reins? Like, they have options, but they don't have a necessary solution yet. And I think that, that's going to have to come with lineup staggering and all kinds of different things. Because I'm not comfortable with the starting lineup, Amir, that you threw out, that I think could be their starting lineup. But I think defensively they're going to struggle out of the gate.
All right, Ethan, I kind of got a 2-part question for you about some of the upcoming events here. With training camp and media day around the corner, what do you expect the overall team chemistry to be and the overall vibe that the team is going to have with the whole Jimmy contract situation, and with, not running it back like you just said, but having sort of the same core that you have for like the past 6 years or so? And what do you think the main goal of training camp should be for this team?
Well, I think, as far as the Jimmy thing goes, I'm very interested to see what that looks like. I don't think other players will get involved in it. I think they will defer. That's between Jimmy and the team. Jimmy's a great player. Jimmy's taken us places that other players couldn't take us. That's the kind of stuff you're going to hear. I think a lot of it is going to be fed from his demeanor. I mean, it's in the Bahamas also. Well, media day is media day. He's going to have to speak at media day, I would assume. He didn't speak at the end of year thing. And he really doesn't do anything but promotional interviews otherwise. So, I know that, it came out through Shams, who I know that his people don't have a relationship with. They're not fans of Shams. And yet it came out through Shams, that he would not take an extension, even if it was offered at this point, which does not surprise me, because I reported on the day that all this happened with Pat that Jimmy's camp was shocked by sort of the approach that Pat took. And I know there were some things said publicly that were very conciliatory, but I can tell you that they were very surprised about it. And I don't know necessarily that has smoothed over. So, here we are, and it's September, and training camp is around the corner. And I'm curious to see, look, he has a reason to come in motivated, and they're counting on that. They're counting on contract year Jimmy. They're counting on him basically taking out his frustrations on the rest of the league. But that could change. And I think they will get that guy. I do, but I think that could change. Look, his money's at stake long term. It's not just with the Heat. It's with anybody else. And I think their requests for more availability across the board, not just him, is reasonable. And I think it needed to be done. But the people around him will tell you that of the 22 games he missed last year, like 17, there really wasn't a choice. There were like 5 that like Jimmy kind of, I don't really feel like going tonight. My issue with Jimmy, and I'll get back to training camp thing. My issue with Jimmy is not so much the 22 games missed. It's the 60 games he played, where there were a lot of them that he just did not engage. And when he does not engage, the rest of the team feeds off that. And I think, you saw it early in the season. Big game. Well, not big game. There's no big games early, but they played Boston. He really didn't show up. He played Milwaukee. Didn't really show up. Against the top 10 defenses in the league last year, he shot 42.8% from the field, and averaged under 20 points a game. I think like under 18.9, I think it was. So, I think okay, that's fine, but that's not superstar numbers. There weren't enough games last year where he was the best player on the floor. And that's the contract he wants. I mean, he wants to be played like the best player on the floor. And again, they don't go anywhere without him the past few years, and he has worked out much better, I think, than anybody could have anticipated from an on-court perspective. But I think that we will see. Yes, how are they going to react in training camp? I think it's how Jimmy comes to camp. Now, part of it, the thing that's positive, after media day, they go to the Bahamas for 5 days, and they've made it so expensive to get there. Not the Heat, but the hotel they're staying at. That there's going to be very little media there, and so I think that he may be able to skate on the situation for a few days. But it's going to be brought up the entire season because look, Bam got his extension, and so there does appear to be kind of a pivot here, even if nobody really wants to acknowledge it. Now, as far as what they try to accomplish in training camp. I mean, I think mostly Spo needs to come up with combinations. Like the starting lineup is a starting lineup. Like they're more concerned about closing lineups. But he needs to come up with combinations that work and how he gets to them if everybody is available and healthy. But, it's okay, how do we stagger Rozier and Herro so that we have a scorer on the floor at all times that we can play through? Where does Duncan fit in this? How do we get the minutes between Duncan and Bam? If Kevin Love's going to be the backup four, he and Jimmy tend to play very well together, so you want to make sure that they get out there together. And then I also think it becomes, all right, what can they count on from Larson, from Keshad Johnson this year? Like I have a feeling Johnson may play more than both of them, actually, the way that they're structured right now. So I just think that, they'll see the young guys and then they'll see the vets like, Richardson. How healthy does he come back? How healthy does Duncan come back? How healthy does Rozier come back? And how much load management are they going to do this season as compared? And they won't call it load management, but how much availability will they get from these players this year?
Yeah, I love it. Martell would always talk about how Jimmy played 65 games last season, but in 20 of those games, he would load manage in games, right? So being very passive. So as long as he plays 65, but he plays in all 65 and doesn't miss the third game of the season, and, we know he missed the preseason because of dental work. So we just need Jimmy to be engaged and active in those 65, which I think will be good. But my last question before we close, Ethan. So we know Vegas projects the Miami Heat to win 44.5, which puts us at the 8th seed again, which would put us back in the play-in. What is your prediction for the year? I know you mentioned you think Jimmy's going to try to live up to this final year, obviously, so he can get an extension, whether it's with the Miami Heat or not. Obviously, you mentioned Hawk is expected to have elite. Bam, hopefully should be improved. Terry, a full year. What's your just projection, I guess, just for the way we end up next season?
It's weird because usually I have a very strong feeling about this and I give you a win total. But I really think there's two tracks for this season, and I don't know for sure which way it's going to go. If you look at their opening schedule, their first 5 games, 3 of their games are against Detroit, Washington, Charlotte. Like there are 5 awful, awful teams in the East. Awful. Not trying to win. They're going to be trying to get Cooper Flag. Okay. So there's a bottom in the East. Like they're not going to be able to fall through the bottom. And then there's Atlanta and Chicago, which they should be better than both of those teams too. But then you look at the teams above, and this is why everybody kind of has them in a tier by themselves, because it's kind of like they're better than all those teams, clearly. Like just as long as Bam's on the roster, they're better than all those teams. But then you look above them and you're like, all right, Boston, Philly, New York, it's going to be tough to get in the mix with them. So then you're saying, okay, who can you pick off? Like, okay, Milwaukee has some age with its supporting cast, including its high-end supporting cast. I like Gary Trent, but I'm not a huge believer in the rest of their depth. And then you talk about Orlando. Okay, there should be a jump there, but sometimes young teams don't jump the way you expect. I like the KCP acquisition. I think Paolo's going to continue to get better. I think they're going to be very good defensively. I don't necessarily think like all of a sudden they're a 55-win team, but we'll see. Cleveland, I mean, they did what they had to do this offseason, but that mix is still flawed. Like Mitchell and Garland don't really work that well together. Mobley and Allen really don't work that well together. So it's kind of now you've lost Okoro. You still have Strus, but they really didn't upgrade anything else. You change coaches, which might be an upgrade because I like Atkinson. But okay, and then you're saying Indiana. I think teams are going to figure out Indiana's style of play this year. I think they could be the team that really drops. So maybe that's the one that you pick off, but they're going to have to pick off these a couple of these teams in front of them. So I think that the conventional wisdom is, okay, they're basically a play-in team, like a high-end play-in team that could be a threat, sort of the same way they've been the last 2 years. But I do think it could go either of the other two ways. I do think that if you get major improvement from Hawkes, okay, I think if Bam is featured a little bit more, they do get more health overall, and they get contract year Jimmy in the majority of the games. I think they could be a 4 seed potentially. I think that would kind of be the upside. But I also think there's a chance because of their opening schedule. Like I said, if they don't clean up in those really early games, then they go on a 6-game trip. They play 5 playoff teams, including back-to-back in Indiana, but they get OKC on that trip. Okay, it's a brutal trip. And they got a lot of road games early in the year. And I know they played just about the same on the road as home last year, but typically teams don't. There could be a scenario where the team just stumbles out of the blocks to the degree, and then guys start sitting, and then Jimmy's sitting, that they just decide at that point. It will take a lot because remember they were 11-30. They didn't want to tank that year, okay, and they ended up going 30-11 the rest of the way. It will take a lot, but they could just say we're not tanking, but we're going to pivot completely, and we're going to reload around Bam and Hawkes. Maybe Tyler, we'll see, or maybe he's moved. Maybe Jovic, or maybe he's moved. But basically, like we're gonna go a different direction. We're gonna see what assets we can get for Jimmy. We're gonna try to flip those assets somewhere else. So that's why I say I don't think that's likely. I just want to make that clear. I don't think that's likely, but I think it's possible. And because of that, as much as I think they're like a 45-win team, probably 45, 46, maybe. Spo gets them up a little higher, perhaps. I also think they could be a 36-win team if they decided at a certain point, okay, we're gonna go a different direction, and this is gonna be a transition bridge year to the year after. So that's my cop-out answer, but I'm just trying to cover all the bases because I think it's an interesting year. It's a run it back year, but it's an interesting year because it's not a running back forever year. Like they didn't make commitments to run it back forever. They may essentially have. They're waiting for an opportunity to either get the guy that's going to help Jimmy or say, okay, we're going to move Jimmy and we're going to build around Bam.
Got it. Thank you so much, Ethan, for joining the show once again. And I'm assuming, again, all of our audiences follow you guys, obviously on 5 Reasons, but just want to let the audience know real quick where they can find your work before you hop off.
Appreciate it, Amir. Well, a few places. 5 on the Floor podcast is kind of the number one spot. We finally got through our top 40 players of all time. I felt like we were going to do the top 400 at a certain point. So apologies to anybody who didn't make that. And we'll be pivoting to coverage for this season as we go forward here. But also 5 Reasons Sports on Twitter, 5 Reasons Sports YouTube channel. Plenty of Dolphins and Canes content on there as well. So make sure that you check that out. Obviously, both teams undefeated, so we're going to be doing quite a bit on there. And Messi's back, so we do have a Messi and Company podcast. Well, we think he's back. He seems to be back. I don't know. He's a Publix. I know that. In Lauderdale by the Sea. So anyway, you can follow all of our coverage in all those places. We appreciate the time for you guys, and you guys do good work. So thanks for bringing me on.
Thanks again,
Thank
Grant.
you, Ethan.
Yeah, Grant, you want to let the audience know where they can find you as well?
Just at GM Sports Report on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Just released our first episode last week, me and my buddy, and we're going to do one again on Wednesday. We're going to be talking about a lot of NFL Week 1 coverage and a preview for UFC 306 in the Sphere. So look forward to that. Thank you guys for having me again.
No problem. Take care, guys.
And that's enough said.